And we're live. A little bit early, just before 9 o'clock. Hello there to anybody out there in YouTube land. Hope you're all keeping well. Another stormy night here tonight, as always. we're just talking always about the number of storms that seem to be hitting us this year. We've had about 5 or 6 in a row. And our house is getting battered a wee bit tonight. There we go. There's the wind blowing at the door and the window. So I hope you're all keeping well. Say hello if you're out there. And we'll get going with chapter 13 of Dune. And of course, just as we know, Dune doesn't have chapter numbers or anything like that. So our epigraph that we'll be starting with is the one that begins on that first day when Muad'Dib rode through the streets of Arrakis, page 105 in this edition. Excuse me. And compared to the last chapter, this is quite a short one. I'm thinking, thank goodness, because the last chapter was enormous. There's Chaya saying, Shalom all, Shalom Chaya, and Cynthia saying, hi Doc, and a belated happy birthday. Thank you very much, Cynthia. I had a nice relaxed evening. It was good fun. And I have to say, I've got some, it's nice getting a birthday. As far as I'm concerned, I tend to pick up book tokens. So I've got some nice books on the way. Looking for, well, actually, you know something, we were talking on the Science Fiction Friday, we were chatting about Philip K. Dick, and I was saying I had all the Philip K. Dick books. And I should have said I've read them all, but it turns out I've got a couple missing. And just going through some of my books to figure out which ones were missing that I really kind of loved. And I found Valis missing, so I've got a copy of Valis on the way. And a copy of the Toynbee Cully as well. And something new for me to read, which is, I think I got some Ursula K. Le Guin, a book of hers I haven't read yet, which I think is called The Word for World is Forest, which I'm looking forward to. So I've got some nice new books there. So thank you very much, Cynthia. And as I get to my age, I suppose that's what birthdays are good for, I think, book tokens. Let me just move my chair a wee bit here, folks. Sorry. Get ourselves a little bit more comfortable. And there's Bojack saying good afternoon. Good afternoon, Bojack. How you doing? Excuse me. And Peter Zidek says, at the foot of the hill, there's a neat little still where smoke curves up to the sky. That sounds like the beginning of a limerick, Peter. Oh, where's that at? Where are you at again, Peter? If you can remind me. From the smoke and the smell, you can plainly tell that Potching Brewery nearby. Oh, right. The foot of a hill, there's a neat little still where smoke curves up to the sky. From the smoke and the smell, you can plainly tell that Potching Brewing nearby. I was wondering, I thought it sounded like a limerick. Dear oh dear, you got to watch the Potching. I haven't had Potching in years. The last time I had Potching, a friend of mine brought 3 bottles of the stuff over to London, and we enjoyed giving it to some English people. It was good fun. It's lethal, that stuff. Oh dear. Funnily enough, I don't know if you Potching breweries nearby. The main place you used to get Potching from was the police in this country, because they go around seizing it all. So if that was it, if you wanted some good Potching, you'd pick some up from the cops. That was pretty much the only way I ever got Potching. So there you go. Potching, for anybody who doesn't know what it is I suppose what would be the American word, moonshine, that kind of thing. Very high strength alcohol made from potatoes. So it's about, what would it be? It's about 95% alcohol, and it's about 190 proof, something like that. It can be quite dodgy. If you set fire to it, you can use it as fuel. It'll burn for quite some time. There you go. But yeah, good to see you all, folks. Thanks for joining us. And as I said, hopefully this is a wee bit of a short chapter. I have to say, my throat has been getting shredded over the last couple of weeks. I'm doing an awful lot of talking online. isn't really giving itself getting it a chance to sort of get better. So I've been gulping down plenty of honey and cough sweets. We're not starting to feel a bit less bunged up, I suppose, at the minute the weather's starting to change. So let's have a look. Chapter 13, as always, we'll begin with our epigraph. On that first day, when Muad'Dib rode through the streets of Arrakis with his family, some of the people along the way recalled the legend and the prophecy, and they ventured to shout, "Mahdi!" But their shout was more a question than a statement, for as yet they could only hope he was the one foretold as the Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world. Their attention was focused, too, on the mother, because they had heard she was a Bene Gesserit, and it was obvious to them that she was like the other Lisan al-Gaib. From the Manual of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. So it's quite an interesting little one to start this chapter, I think. It sort of shows us playing with time a little bit here as well. Excuse me. And that we'll get a sense of something that's happened here during the first day that we haven't been a party to. The historical epigraph's a party to it. So this first day, whenever they've been traveling through the streets, and apparently people have been shouting out Mahdi, and as I said, let's see, as he the Lisan al-Gaib and the voice from the outer world. So at some point during the day, and this chapter, kind of interestingly, the epigraph starts about the first day, but what we're actually looking at is we're going to the end of the first night in the action here. So just made a wee note just initially that, again, Herbert's playing about a bit with time. Time isn't particularly linear for us in this story. So straight away we get this word, Mahdi. And we're told within the epigraph this is a question rather than a statement to do with legend and prophecy. And we have to assume that in the timeline of this must be before Mapes has come to Jessica. Excuse me. We have that word hope. Again, they could only hope, for he was the one foretold. And then we have this phrase, the Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world. So there's kind of a tripartite equation here, if you like. The word Mahdi equates to the word Lisan al-Gaib, which equates to this voice from the outer world. And it also, in this epigraph, there's also a focus on the mother. And quite interestingly, and this is the bit that I think needs a wee bit of thought, maybe, we're told their attention was focused too on the mother because they had heard she was a Bene Gesserit, and it was obvious to them that she was like the other Lisan al-Gaib. And so the question here becomes, who is the other Lisan al-Gaib? I think that's kind of interesting. Peter's saying, policemen from Donegal, Sligo, Leitrim too, will give them a slip and take a sip of the real Bold Mountain Dew. Very good. Excellent, Peter. Well done. Thank you very much for that. I love limericks, I have to say. Oh dear. What was the old one? I remember there's a few. I used to use some of Spike Mulligan's poems, kids' poems, whenever I used to teach poetry at university, as a way of kind of telling, getting the students to not take themselves too seriously or the poems too seriously, if you know what I mean. Oh, it was Spike Mulligan and what is it? It's the fake poet, the Steve Martin one. Is it Richard Dillman? Is that what you call him? The Britain's greatest one-armed poet. He was the first person to be killed in a car accident. But what was it? There was a young girl called Nellie. She had a nylon belly. The skin was so thin we could all see in. It was full of custard and jelly. There you go. That's the one that I remember from childhood. It's Spike Mulligan. It was excellent. Of course, that's from Unspun Socks from a Chicken's Laundry, I think, is the title of the book. Excuse me. So it is an interesting question here. Who is this other Lisan al-Gaib? Is it Paul? In that sense, is it we think that Paul's the Mahdi, the Lisan al-Gaib, this voice from the other world? They're saying that she was like the other Lisan al-Gaib, and I think that's I'm not too sure if it refers to Paul, and I've actually wondered who does this refer to. And I put it could be Paul, it could be Leat Kynes, it could be Pardo Kynes, and it's possible. It might be the Reverend Mother Ramallo. I'm not too sure, and I'm trying to remember what I can about her, but I can't remember very much. So it might be something we might have to look at whenever we meet her. But I was just wondering, who is it? She was a Bene Gesserit. It was obvious to them that she was like the other Lisan al-Gaib. So I'm not too sure. I'm wondering what your thoughts on are that about that. Is it that Jessica's like her son? Is it like Paul? Who is the other Lisan al-Gaib of the Epigraph? So I suppose also we have this term, the Mahdi, which is quite an important term. If we look it up in the terminology of the Imperium, we're told it's from Fremen messianic legend and relates to the one who will lead us to paradise. In Arabic, it's from al-Mahdi, which means the rightly guided one, I believe. Let's see. I've scribbled down a few wee things. I've actually got some stuff on the Mahdi in the videos on the station. So basically, we're talking about an end times figure in Islam, not mentioned in the Quran, but appears in Hadith literature. The Mahdi is meant to arrive alongside Jesus, defeat the Al-Masih ad-Dajjal, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, probably not, which is the false Messiah. Now, from my point of view, I kind of just looked at historical Mahdis. There have been a few people who have claimed to be the Mahdi over the years, and I sort of chatted about a couple of, I think one of them in particular, Muhammad Ahmad bin Abd Allah. His dates are 1844 to 1885. You can have a look at him on Wikipedia. And so if you're having a look at, let me see, probably the episode on Paul or else the Kwisatz Haderach where I discussed the Mahdi. I think we mentioned him a bit there, and there's some stuff in the footnotes. Excuse me. So the Lisan al-Gaib, again, within the terminology of the Imperium, is to do with Fremen messianic legends and refers to an off-world prophet. We're told that this phrase is sometimes translated as giver of water. Now, if you have a wee look online, and again, you'll find the details within my videos, we have some really good work on, honestly, what would you call it? Bear with me a wee second, I'll give you the proper title of this. It's on Islamic terms in Dune. Here we go. It's by Khaled M. Bahildon. Let me just see if I can get his name of his work up here. Right, where are we? And his website's still good, by the way. I just double checked it there. Yeah, there we go. Bahildon KM 2004 last update. Islamic themes in Frank Herbert's Dune. Pardon me. Yeah, I will just copy that. Suppose this is a way of using this. If anybody's interested, there we go. There's a link to the website, and so it's great having somebody done this kind of work for you. So on his web, he'll tell us on his website, he'll tell us that lisan is tongue or speaker, and the word gaib, interestingly enough, a couple of different definite, but essentially something that's unknown, or I find this rather interesting. Things that will come in the future, which are unknown to us now, which is quite an interestingly specific sort of translation. And whenever I was looking at this, that Khaled made a wee comment on his work, that this idea within the word gaib, that translation, that things that will come in the future that are unknown to us now. He made a wee comment that I think this is kind of interesting, that God, it's a basic tenet of the Muslim faith, that God alone knows what is hidden in the future. So it gives a very interesting religious context to that work. That's Khaled's website there. I've put a wee link in. and I think he does all sorts of things. But if he has a what do you call it, sort of a website structure to it, and if you look for Dune within that, if that doesn't take you directly to the article, but it's a really good article on Islamic terms within Dune. So just these terms that Paul's being referred to. Excuse me. This will be the first time we kind of meet these terms within the book, really. We might have heard them mentioned, but I don't think we've heard Maddie before at this point. And so, as much as, yeah, our epigraph here is really about the first day. We've followed the action in Dune through the first day, and we're in the first night heading towards the dawn. So I think it's kind of interesting. We have an epigraph telling us about something that happened, and we can assume that it's kind of as they've arrived on the first day, as they rode through the streets. Ventured to shout Maddie as well. As hopeful. There's something hopeful about it. And again, we always remember the use of this word hope within Dune. Excuse me. Chaya is saying, could it be that the Bene Gesserit that brought the Prophetica Panoplia, or don't worry about the spelling originally. Peter is saying, I would guess Pardo Kynes was the other Lisan Al-Gaib. That's where I was going. Chaya, in terms of that, the Panoplia Prophetica has, or Prophetica Panoplia, whichever one it is, has been here a good while. Whenever we decided not to begin the Dune, by the way, with the kind of prologue, which is at the back of the book, which is an appendix, which tells us Appendix 1 is the ecology of Dune is the little mini adventure of Pardo Kynes. And I want, it's kind of set 20 years before Dune, if you like, or roughly a generation, maybe at least late, will not have been born at this point. And possibly 30 years. It's the myths that are already in place that allow Pardo Kynes to manipulate the Fremen. And he's so, whenever we get to this, as I said, I thought it'd be best to handle that chapter whenever we have hindsight, that we can look at it at the end of the book as where Herbert put it, and we'll have a look at it as a prologue, and we'll have a look at it with a lot more knowledge. But how Pardo treats the Fremen is pretty disgusting. But it's all based on legend and myth, which, simply put, it's the Bene Gesserit myths that are already in place that allows Pardo to kind of religiously and mythologically adapt his ideas of ecology and get the Fremen to get involved in it. So the myths are already in place. So that's in terms of could it be the Bene Gesserit? I think whoever's brought this set of myths here has done so long in the past. So unless it's a recent, I don't know. Would Romalo's a Reverend Mother, isn't she? Or side? We'll have to have a look at that carefully. And I'm wondering, has she turned up? Maybe is it that? Is it possible? But I think in this case it would be Pardo Kynes, possibly. As I said, I've scribbled down all of those names. It could be any of them. They would have to be from off planet. So it didn't, and as much as I've said late, it probably isn't him, because he's not a voice. And again, Leite would have been Leite's born on Arrakis. Leite's a Fremen. So Pardo, I think, looks like the best guess there. It's just a wee curious thing, that she was like the other voice from the outer world. Who is that? And it's again, as much we're speculating here, and it could be part of it, but it's a bit of a mystery at the minute. And again, just another one of these little mysteries that Frank gives us. So, I suppose in contrast to the epigraph, the first day, we're going to shift to the first night, and it's near the end of the night, and we get a little bit of a setup as usual from Frank, and this is a corner room. It's not far from the conference room of the previous chapter. It's pretty much the Duke finds Thufir here alone, and we get a bit of a description of the room. Excuse me. And as usual, that sense of security that the Atreides have allows the Duke to have a bit of a scan around the room and fill in the details for us. there's sound from an adjoining room where there's men and equipment, but this place is fairly quiet. And as Leto glances around the room, we see how it rise up from a paper cluttered table. We're told that this place is a green walled enclosure and that there are 3 suspensor chairs. Interestingly enough, with the Harkonnen symbol of their H, which has been removed, leaving an imperfect color patch. So they'll take no sign of these Harkonnens at all, will they? They'd rather vandalize the chairs than leave a little H on them. And I think there's something quite funny here. The chairs are liberated, but quite safe. um, and I just that's a laugh out loud moment for me. That the chairs have been liberated. They've been, free. That these chairs have been freed from Harkonnen oppression, and they're now quite safe. I just think it's very silly. There. Peter saying, but isn't Ramallo a full-blood Remen, a wild Rever Mother, never a Bene Gesserit Acolyte? Isn't that right? That's what I was saying, Peter. I can't remember. So if you're correct, it's quite likely. I just could not remember. That's why I was saying we'll have to wait till we bump into Ramallo to see if there's any clues. But otherwise, I think money is that it's Pardo Kynes that we're talking about. And if that's the case, though, I suppose she was a Bene Gesserit, and it was obvious to them that she was like the other Lisan al Gaib. They didn't say the other Bene Gesserit, for example. And it makes me wonder what qualities she possesses that makes her like the other Lisan al Gaib if it's Pardo. Suppose maybe that desire to create a religious myth, possibly. Maybe that's it, But yeah, going with it. It can't be Liet, can it? Who did we suggest? We went with Liet, Paul, Pardo, and Ramallo. So either she's like Paul, the other voice of the outer world, the other person that they think, and I don't think it is Paul. It cannot be Liet. It's probably not Ramallo. So strong money is that it is Pardo. Yeah. But so therefore, as I said, it makes it interesting. What is it that this woman riding along in a carriage through Arrakis, what is it that makes them go, got some of the qualities of the other Lisan al Gaib? I wonder what those qualities are. Especially when we get to describe, whenever we get to meet Pardo Kynes in the mini adventure, I think he's a really funny character. He's quite bizarre. He's kind of like a bumbling archaeological professor or something like that. One of those types who's oblivious to the danger around him. He's described a bit as is it a sadist? I think like a slightly crazy holy man. Excuse me. So yeah, we get the room set up by Herbert as usual. And I said just a little trivial details here, but I thought they were kind of funny that the Atreides hate the Harkonnens and vice versa so much that if there's an H on the chair, that they rack it so that it doesn't equal an H. And I thought that was kind of funny. Something, it reminded me of something. I'll show you what I mean. We have I figured, why don't they just round off the H and make it an A? There's a church in Northern Ireland at a place called Glenarm, and it would have been a Catholic church. And let me see if I can do this. We have one of our terrorist organizations decided to write their initials on the whole roof of it was a Catholic church in big, gigantic white letters. And the organization was the UVF, and that's what they wrote on the church roof. And what the priest of the church did, rather than wrecking it, because they threatened to harm him if he wiped it off, basically threatened to kill him as usual. So what he did was he connected up the there you go, and that's what he did there with that organization's name. and it stayed painted on the church for years, and it was a suitable response, I always thought. But I was just thinking, rather than vandalize these things, there's your Harkonnen H. Break out the Atreides Propaganda Arts and Crafts Division and turn it into EA. Oh dear, it's great being a pedant, isn't it? Excuse me. So a wee bit of Atreides vandalism there, and of course, we get this interaction in this chapter between Leto and Thufir. And after this, of course, where the chairs are quite safe, they've been liberated. Where is Paul, sire? So straight to business, is Paul okay? Is he safe? And we get an answer from Leto. And again, this action carrying on from the previous chapter. He's left Paul in the conference room. He hopes he's resting, and he doesn't want to be a distraction to him. So we get a little bit more just setting within the room, and let me just see. Sorry, I've jumped ahead a wee bit. Yes. So we get this, and there we are. I've written the wrong number down. So Howard goes to close the door to the adjoining room and basically shuts off the noise of the static and electronic sparking. So again, we have this kind of hustle and bustle in the adjoining room at the start. This noise, the way noise interrupts things and the action engine, and we get it closed off. Bit of a sense of secrecy, privacy, this kind of thing. And here we go straight away. And I've called this Duke Leto's preemptive strike. Straight to business. And I don't know, this follows on from a couple of things in the previous chapter, and I think they really do give you a sense of Leto's character here. Where are we? What's he about to do? So it's all to do with Imperial and Harkonnen stockpiles of spice. And remember, spice equates to wealth. And he raises his hand before Howard can interrupt. And basically, I think Howard's about to interrupt, so I think to say that going after the Emperor's spice would be a bad idea. But I think Leto preempts him here and tells him to ignore the Emperor's hoard. Great word, that. He secretly enjoy it if the Harkonnens were embarrassed. And can the Baron object if something is destroyed, which he cannot openly admit that he has? So, yeah. And I don't know, it's sometimes you kind of wonder about Leto. We shall cause the Baron great embarrassment. It's I don't know, there's a few questions about to be raised here about how Leto fights a war, I suppose. But it's kind of almost a prankish kind of thing to do. The idea of wrecking these men, I suppose these houses' spice reserves, is probably a smart thing. And it's a question of why doesn't he take it any further? So yeah, and obviously the Baron's been skimming an awful lot of spice over the years. So as much as there's a lot of spice that he has that he probably shouldn't have. So Howard reminds him that they don't have too many men. And very interestingly, he suggests that they use Idaho's men, and possibly that some of the Fremen might enjoy a trip off-world. Ready to use the Fremen straight away. If he can, he's only, again, this is one night in. And he's a bit of an exchange of greetings, a bit of spitting, swapping of knives. Already he's ready to take the Fremen off-world to fight on Geidi Prime. So it's a raid on Geidi Prime that he wants to attack the Baron's spice storehouses. And so the question I've asked here is, if he's going to attack Geidi Prime, why not an all-out attack on Geidi Prime? At the very least, why not attack their ships and spaceports as well as their spice reserves? And kind of almost solve all his, why not just attack properly? Why sit and wait for this to come? The best defense is a good offense, but as they say often, it's vice versa as well, isn't it? And so that's simply a kind of, he makes a preemptive strike here. And it's a guerrilla strike, really, isn't it? Aimed at kicking them in the money, so to speak. And yeah, why not more? Why such a little thing? They have few men, but why not make it why not attack spaceports? This kind of thing, spaceships. Excuse me. Arguably, in the same way that the Baron's about to do to House Atreides, if you see what I mean. That pretty much it does make sense what the Baron does. Here's an opportunity. Why doesn't he take it? Why doesn't he follow it through? Why doesn't he maximize it? Because I suppose, what was it? Somebody we said the other week there. Who said it? It was a quotation at the start of the previous chapter to do with warfare. The whole theory of warfare is calculated risk. Not the key to warfare is mobility. If your enemy can't move, you've got him. If you see, and yeah, it's one of those ideas. Hence, you get the whole sort of siege warfare, this kind of idea. But yeah, not being able to move is not a good thing. And if you have an opportunity to take out your enemy's chance to move, which I think they would have, why not take it? Excuse me. D. Viller, hi D. Later on, the Baron complained about the raid, the cost of space travel. Yeah, and that's the other thing. Moving troops, etc., is really pricey, isn't it? And is it maybe it's just not just the men, it's the price of moving them. Leto has to maintain his reputation amongst the great houses. Your reputation is no good to you if you're dead, I suppose. Because once you're dead, people will say whatever they like about you. They have to fight in the limitation of economics. And the Baron went all in, and it cost 80 years. Absolutely. That's kind of the point. If you're going to send these guys over here, why not really make it kind of, why not go for the, one, if you've got one particular raid to go there, the wealth, I suppose, it'd be much better to take out their spaceships, wouldn't it? They can always buy more, but they'd have to spend the money. I suppose it's all of the wee unknowns that we don't know. And, the devil would be in the details. But for some reason, yeah. But absolutely right. The Baron went all in, and it cost 80 years. It's the whole point about it takes them this long to build up the wealth. And it's about recovering from it afterwards as well, isn't it? With the Baron, that they know it's going to dig into their reserves to do this. But the Baron's goal is to aim for the throne one generation later. Excuse me. So they said by taking the Fremen with them on the raid, Leto can tempt them with military power. Show them a whole new world. And yeah, I know, it's interesting. And we'll get to see, I suppose, whenever we get to Dune Messiah, we'll kind of get this. I think somebody pointed out, the other day, that is it the Fremen get water sick? Is that it, or something like that? Whenever they go off world, it cost 80 years of Arrakis profits the guild rates for space travel. Yeah, very good point, D. Viller. It was just a wee musing, why not go for at the same time, arguably, from the, I suppose, from the Harkonnen, from the Atreides point of view, they could always borrow on the wealth that they're potentially going to make. That's just fun to think about. No matter what, Leto's doomed, isn't he? We can't prevent it from happening. For the Father, nothing. Okie dokie. So yeah, but he's such a, I don't know, it's a tactical advantage he sees in this, and it's a diversion. It's a diversionary tactic. I suppose that was my point. Could have been a main tactic, couldn't it? But I'm not really sure that Leto really knows what to do in regards to the Harkonnen. Doesn't seem to have any active plan, if you know what I mean. Everything seems to be about response. Yeah. So here we go. Leto's thoughts on Howard. So as they're chatting, I read on Geidi Prime, there are tactical advantages to such a diversion of Thufir. As you say, my lord. And Howard turns away, and the Duke saw evidence of nervousness in the old man and thought, so perhaps he suspects that I distrust him. And I made a wee question here. Does Leto distrust Thufir here? And the answer is no. He trusts Thufir. It's just possibly it's his ability as a mentat that's under question, but as a man and as a family, a loyal family retainer, family friend, he does trust Thufir, and we'll get it see evidenced here. But it's the observation of him. He must know. And how would he not? He must know of these private reports of traitors. And is he aware of that? I know it's one of those. Does he know that I know? And how much is this affecting him? Best to quiet his fears immediately. And again, this follows on from the conversation with Paul in the previous chapter, where Paul defends, Thufir, very completely against his father, and it creates that moment of realization in Leto that I should be the one defending him. So this is, I think, the end result of that conversation, and Leto's determined to get Thufir back on board and restore his confidence as a mentat, I think. And certain things need to be said out loud in this chapter to Thufir. He needs to hear them. So Leto assuages Thufir's fears. Again, one of the Thufir, he said, since you're one of the few I can trust completely. There's that absolute that we're used to getting it within the Atreides lot. There's another matter that bears discussion. And here we go. This is all about the traitors, I suppose. We both know, this is our mutual suspicion, how constant a watch we must keep to prevent traitors from infiltrating our forces. But I've got 2 new reports. And how it, again, we have this staring, which is quite a thing within the book, builds for a bit of intensity, how it turned stared at him. And Leto repeated the stories Paul had brought. So just to recap, what Leto was letting him know, hopefully, and I think this is, they should be, 2 reports are, number 1 is the Fremen report as delivered by Mapes. There's a traitor, etc. We don't know. The 2 reports are essentially the same, pretty much, aren't they? And the other one is Margot Fenring's report delivered to Jessica, a Bene Gesserit report. Excuse me. Included with that is also, or what should be included with that, is also the knowledge that the recipients of these reports might believe them, but they may be untrue, and that they may be designed to disrupt and sow suspicion within the Atreides household. So just in Leto repeating the stories that Paul told him there, that's essentially the 3 items of information that Leto should have passed on at this point. And we get a reaction that probably shouldn't fill Leto with confidence here. Instead of bringing on the intense mentat concentration, which is what we should expect from this mentat, the reports only increased Howit's agitation. And again, it gives us another chance for Leto to examine him, to study him. Let's all study him a bit as well. And it's more about he understands him. I think he knows that the agitation, that yes, indeed. I mean, what good a mentat would he be if he didn't know about the traitors at this point? To be honest with you, if he didn't know a thing about traitors within House Atreides, he'd be the worst intelligence officer ever. Yeah, he gets it. You're holding something back, and again, he reinforces the language here, and always everything's carefully presented. Well, usually with Leto, I think it's only when his anger's at issue. You've been holding something back, old friend. I should have suspected when you were so nervous during staff. What is it that's too hot to dump in front of the full conference? And again, old friend, we've got that there reinforcing, one of the few I can trust completely. He's going to keep addressing Thufir this way. Oh, Holly just the way out. Are you okay, big love? And so a little bit more of the study of how it's face. We get the Safu stained lips pulled into a prim straight line with tiny wrinkles radiating into them. They maintain their wrinkled stiffness, as he said, "My lord, I don't quite know how to broach this." So we get a wee mention of Sappho there, the juice of Sappho or Sappho, as we the terminology of the Imperium tells us that this is a high energy liquid from the barrier roots of the Kaz, used by mentats, and it leaves deep ruby stains on mouth and lips. And I'm not sure, is it the little juice of Sappho? It is by will alone I set my mind in motion. Is that down to Brad Dourif in the David Lynch film? Did he come up with that? I'm always wondering about that. I don't think it's in the book, is it? Must check that actually. Bear with me a wee second. Oh, that's not the book. Let's see. Nope. There you go. Must be one of those things from the film. But I don't know. I thought I got the sense that maybe somebody made it up. What was it? The actor, possibly. I don't know. What is it? It's by will alone I set my mind in motion. It is by the juice of Sappho that thoughts acquire speed, the lips acquire stains, the stains become a warning. It is by will alone I set my mind in motion. No, it's not in the book. There we go. Seb says, thanks, Seb. Another cool phrase Lynch added. It's a cracker, isn't it? It's really good. I have to say, I really enjoyed that. I think it's a great moment in the film. Actually, very just what the heck's this, you know? But yeah, makes sense. So just another one of our drugs from this world. And again, just one as we go, we hit these little words within the book. Wonder what that is. We should check out the terminology of the Imperium. It's quite helpful sometimes. Most of the times. So this agitation has been what's been bothering this whatever it is that Thufir's been holding back, and it's a bad one in particular, I suppose. But we get a nice sort of interaction between the two here, and I think it's kind of reaffirming of their relationship in a way. And it's a kind of a two-way street. I think Leto's concern for Thufir here, and we get a wee bit of Thufir's thoughts on his concerns for Leto, I suppose, as well. He doesn't know how to broach this subject, and of course, you know, Leto does it for him. We've shared many a scar, this kind of thing. Any subject is okay for us to discuss. And this little bit here, where how it continued to stare at him, thinking. And here we go. I think this is really nice. This is how I like him best. This is the man of honor who deserves every bit of my loyalty and service. Why must I hurt him? You know, and well, Leto demanded that you know, it's kind of that quite nice little run of thoughts there, interrupted by a kind of, you know, demanding question. And so here we go. It's all to do with what we the Harkonnen courier's note. Excuse me. So running through this, we have a fair bit of detail. I'll just hit my notes for it here. What we have essentially, the gist of the plan, and this is part of a Harkonnen deviance, is that there's a scrap of a note. It's been found upon a Harkonnen courier, and it's meant for an agent called Pardy. And apparently Pardy was the top man in the Harkonnen underground on Arrakis. And quite interesting, he says that the note is either of great consequence or of none at all. There's the full range of possibilities within this note. And of course, how it notes that it's susceptible to various interpretations. Excuse me. And we get we get a few wee bits more information about it. We're told that the scrapping note is used on, and I used to think this word was mimetic here, but it's not. But it's on a mini mic film, which I thought, oh, not a little bit of an, just as I thought as I was writing that down that I'd always misread that. But it's a mini mic film. It has the usual destruction capsule attached. Mini mic film with the usual destruction capsule attached. We stop the acid action just short of full erasure, leaving only a fragment. The fragment, however, is extremely suggestive. And again, just this, yes, from Leto. And here we go, the note's contents. So the first letter is broke off. We don't get the L for Leto, but it says, Leto will never suspect, and when the blow falls on him from a beloved hand, its source alone should be enough to destroy him. And the note, we're told, is under the Baron's own seal, and that Thufir has authenticated the seal. So it's an awful lot of information dump here. And again, I suppose the other part of this is that it gives us a little bit of, once again, insight into what sort of universe these people live in. It's strongly sort of reminiscent of all the spy shenanigans, in World War II, this kind of thing. That every courier has a note and it has its own self-destruct mechanism with an acid attack, all of this kind of thing. It's all kind of interesting and mysterious and, very, all this espionage. It also seems very over the top, doesn't it? Excuse me. Well, where do we get to? So, Leto will never suspect it's from a beloved hand. Of course, we know that this is fakery and it is designed, based on the Baron's plan in Chapter 2. We know that this is designed exactly to do what it says on the tin, if you like, create suspicion, set them amongst each other. Or against each other, sorry. So your suspicion, we're told, Leto says your suspicion is obvious, and Leto's voice goes suddenly cold. I suppose we haven't had the traitor's name mentioned yet, but that little cold mention there, we keep having the word cold associated with Jessica from the minute she's on Arrakis. The word cold is always attached to her. So that's a little bit of a clue. It should be, it's probably Jessica. We get this, I'd sooner cut my own arms off, and again cut off. And Leto says the suspicion out loud. So he states it rather than Thufir having to tell him. And I think, which is a kindness to a degree, even though he's pretty angry. The Lady Jessica, Leto said, and he felt anger consuming him. Couldn't you wring the facts out of this party? So the Lady Jessica is the number one suspect here to be the traitor. And again, we've had this run for the last couple of chapters, really, of Leto's anger and how he's been trying to deal with it and how it seems to be getting the better of him. And at this point, he feels it consume him. We're told that this party is already dead, that the courier who was carrying the message for party probably wasn't aware that this guy was already dead, and also that the courier didn't know what he carried. And again, we get this is a little bit of language from Leto that we heard previously. What a slimy piece of business. That's it's all very slimy. This is the second time we've heard this from him. There can't be anything in it. I know my woman. And then, of course, we get this little interruptions that keep getting broken off. My lord, here we go. No, the Duke Bart. There's a mistake here and we have no Bart mistake. Again, I suppose the language is reflecting his anger, isn't it? She's been with me for 16 years. There have been countless opportunities for you yourself. Here, I've jumped ahead a wee bit, have I? Oh, no. So Leto, sorry, I have a wee bit. Thufir tells him that he can't ignore this. And here this is where I was at here. That Leto and Jessica have been together for 16 years. There have been countless opportunities for her to have done something in that time. And we're also told that almost as if he's blaming him. Um, you yourself investigated the school and the woman! Exclamation mark. He's shouting. He's exclaiming. Um, that's made me ask a little question there. We talked previously about the Duke's representatives whenever they go to buy Jessica. And the little question I've asked here is: did Thufir buy Jessica for Leto? Is he the purchaser, if you like? Excuse me, my throat's getting a wee bit. I'll have a wee look at your comments here, folks. Excuse me. Cynthia, where did we get to? Yeah, Cynthia says, small point, but interesting that Howit's wrinkles radiate inwards as if he wanted to swallow any sound he was about to make. Ah, very good. And the other thing I thought was interesting about how he's described something the tiny wrinkles radiating maintained the wrinkled stiffness. It's as if, as you're saying, obviously I wanted to swallow, but it's almost as if the wrinkles are kind of holding his face together, if you see what I mean. But it's his smile I thought was quite interesting. The Sappho stained lips were pulled into a prim straight line. Yeah, very good point. Yeah, that's a kind of spiderwebby almost, if you know what I mean. And it seems to suit his nature, but it's like a structure. That's where we're at. Seb M says, interesting how the drug can increase mentat performance, perhaps by increasing the speed of information processing in the brain. Could melange have a similar effect? Explaining Jessica's frozen time vision in the Water of Life ritual. As information processing speed rises, time appears to slow down. Increased brain power could also explain how melange awakens prescience. Ah. Right, okay, Seb, that's a good one. Thank you very much. Let me see. Let's take. Interesting how the drug can increase mentat performance, right? Yeah. By increasing the speed of information processing in the brain, could melange have a similar effect? The gist of what I get about melange in the book is this: that lots of people take melange for all sorts of different reasons. And that melange is almost a universal stand-in for those drugs as well. That a mentat could, for example, take Sappho for an effect to increase, I suppose, their ability to do computations, this kind of thing. But apparently they can use melange for the same purpose. And we know that the navigators use it, don't we? But from what I get is that once you use melange for a particular purpose, then the old drug ceases to be of use. And we're talking about having a wee note, trying to mark down all the properties of melange that we can find as we go. So we're just, for anybody who's new here tonight, we're literally annotating the hell out of this book to try and find out as much little bits of information and tidbits and clues to references that Frank was making as possible. So it's a very good point, Seb. So yeah, I think melange can be a shoe-in for almost any drug within the Dune universe, but it creates problems for the previous drug, I think. In the Water of Life ritual, it's could melange have a similar experience? Jessica's frozen time vision in the Water of Life ritual. Well, the Water of Life is the bile, isn't it? The from the newborn worms of Arrakis that are drowned from the little makers. So melange is formed from the excretions of the sandworms. So there is some sort of relationship. There would have to be that they're byproducts of the same living animal, if you like. Although arguably the worm is kind of different things in different stages of its life cycle. So the Water of Life itself must have some sort of relationship to melange. Can melange have explained Jessica's frozen time vision in the Water of Life ritual? Information processing speed rises, time appears to slow down, increase brain power. Could also explain how melange awakens prescience. Yeah. I've got something. I think well, the awakening of prescience. That's a very good one, Seb. But I have to say you've got a lot of points there. I'd have to sit and have a good think about it. Hmm. I think the time slowing down, that's more like a nature of awareness. I was talking about that. I've mentioned before on here. I was in a very bad car crash, Seb, and that whole time my car was completely crushed, and in like a bang, boom, done. And in that time, the whole thing happened to me in slow motion, and even my handbrake and everything was crushed, and I was able to kind of move and go, "Ooh, I better get out of the way, and that much of my car was left, and I was in it. And it was all very much a slow motion. Just I was able to react, but it just seemed normal to me. So yeah, time of crisis perhaps, but yeah, there's bound to be a connection, isn't there? Increasing the speed of information processing in the brain. We'll have to see. As I said, one of these things is about jogging memory, Seb. So hopefully we'll hit these questions as we go. But yeah, thank you very much. But yeah, Melange is very interesting, and as I've pointed out a couple of times, for even if anybody's not particularly interested in reading the book, you could probably do a kind of a if you had an electronic copy of it, you could probably do a sort of skim read through it, if you like, of Vril or the Coming Race. So the drug of the Vril in that book by Edward Bulwer Lytton, it's very similar to melange and it has many, many uses. So I was saying, wow, that's crazy. Thought that stuff was only in films. Hope you were okay. I was not okay a week later, but I walked out of it without a scratch. Absolute, and yeah, and I had to go on holiday the next day, so a lot of people didn't see me for a month, and all they saw was what was left of my car, and everybody thought I was hopelessly mangled. Penguin Dip says, "Oh my God, it's the bass guitarist from Happy Shrapnel." It is. It's me. Hi, Penguin Dip. How's it going? Once upon a time, yes, indeed. What life? But yeah, no, it does happen. It's I don't know. It happened to me, and it's the only time it's ever happened to me. So I have no other explanation for it. I think it was a time of just your body pumps every little bit of adrenaline and everything. Just goes to hyper emergency mode, if you like. Mm. And I think that's to a degree when we're talking about the Kwisatz Haderachs in terms of how they evolve. It's always at a crisis point. Your metaphorical Gom Jabbar, if you like. And we were also chatting about the Stars My Destination, Tiger recently, and the whole imagine that your Gom Jabbar is a hold spaceship with no air in it, and you have to play Russian roulette with air tanks for 171 days, and you become gully foil. So I'm starting to see a massive influence really on that character in that book in June. Really starting to think about it. But yeah, very good point. There's quite a lot. We've been making a wee note actually as we go, Seb, by the way, that there's quite a lot of drugs in this book. And I've been identifying, that's why we had a wee quick stop at Sappho. We've been identifying and having a chat about each one of them as we go. So we've got plenty. And there's an awful lot of drugs. And what do we have the last time we had Rakag and a car, was it? Acarso. Rakag is a caffeine type stimulant from the yellow berries of Acarso. Acarso is the plant native to Sikon of 70 Ophioca I, oblong leaves, green and white stripes, parallel activity of active and dormant chlorophyll regions. And then Leto offers them all coffee. An acceptable drug, perhaps. But it says whenever all his men arrive, they all stink of this drug. Excuse me. Here we go. How it spoke bitterly. And again, we've heard this word a couple of times, bitterness, being bitter, particularly with Jessica and also with Leto. And the bitterness comes from, I suppose, an awareness of his own limitations. Dear. Things have been known to escape me. And I've just made a note actually because we have been asking questions and the characters have been asking questions. Is Thufir aware of his own limitations of his mentat function being impaired at this point? And I would say that actually I've made it. I think he is, and that's the interesting thing. Thufir is aware of his limitations at this point, which I think contributes to his nervousness. And of course, in terms of what Leto thinks about, is it Jessica? It's impossible. Impossible, I tell you. The Harkonnens want to destroy the Atreides line, meaning Paul, too. They've already tried once. Could a woman conspire against her own son? I've written yes, of course. Why wouldn't He's very naive as our Leto, isn't he? But yeah, he sees it as impossible. But we get, and I've made a wee note here. This is basically Leto and Thufir working the problem, I think. Thufir going and we have this word perhaps, by the way, folks, and we hear it several times. By the way, we've got a couple of mentions of it here. I'll point it out again, and we have it. Goodness, we have about 7 or 8 of them, and we have a couple of perhapses right at the end. So perhaps could be possibly maybes, So the whole point is, once again, we get well, it sort of results in Jessica's birthright being brought up, doesn't it? But initially, and yeah, it's all about wiping out an Atreides line, the whole a whole family, and family on family kind of fighting, if you like. And it's a little bit reminiscent of some of those kind of medieval kind of things, and even our Montagues and Capulets and this kind of thing. Perhaps she doesn't conspire against Paul. Very specific thing. In other words, not Paul, but maybe you. Perhaps yesterday's attempt was a clever sham. And interestingly, and of course, Leto says it couldn't have been a sham. No way. And arguably, if you think from Leto's point of view, she doesn't conspire against Paul. No, she doesn't. Yesterday's attempt was a clever sham. In actuality, it was. It was a proper attempt, but if it didn't work, it was part of a deception. It's part of the many assaults, if you like, that the Baron sets up before the Atreides feel comfortable. It's all in the Baron's plan. An attempt on Paul will be made, and the Baron is hopeful that it won't succeed, isn't it? Because of his he's being rather sexually predatorish towards Paul at that point. So part of him, in a sense, wants Paul to survive, but the attack has to be real. But it is a feint, if you like. Leto again, and yeah, it couldn't be a sham. Sorry, and here we get Jessica's lineage being brought up again. She isn't supposed to know her parentage. So everything that Thufir's come up, these are all perhaps, they're suggestives, aren't they? They're all very suggestive. She isn't supposed to know her parentage. The suggestion being, what if she does? What if she were an orphan? Say, orphaned by an Atreides. And of course, Leto says that she would have moved by now, poison in my drink, stiletto in the night. Who would have had a better opportunity? I'm going to sneeze here, folks. So give me 1 wee second. I'm going to hit mute and blow my nose, but preemptive before I sneeze. Hi. There we go. That's better. I think I might have stopped it before it happened. Oh dear, oh dear. I'm a mutant, by the way, folks. I don't know if you know this, but I had 5 wisdom teeth, of which recently I've got a bunch of them out, but I've still got 1 left. So I've had 4 removed, and it's kind of created little sort of holes at the back of my throat that keep catching with air. But at the same time, I don't know what's happened, but now I've got a kind of a weird hollow in my nose, and it kind of does weird things. And just before that, I start sneezing, or just after it. So it's kind of getting, I don't know. It's like it's all changed. I'm trying to get used to it. Jumping off topic there. But so yes, they're working the problem, and sorry about that. And I've just made a wee note here. Again, with Jessica's parentage, but the whole what if she was the whole suggestion here is what if she was an orphan, and what if it was one of us that killed her parents? Is pretty much you know kind of the plot to Once Upon a Time in the West. This kind of thing emerging here almost, and I've actually written down how likely is that? What is that likely? Um, does it happen much? That's what I've written. How likely happen much? Um, she could be an orphan, and we might have killed her parents. And this is genuinely what Thufir puts on the table here. And arguably, I suppose, with the Atreides being a military house, private army, there's a fair chance that they and their troops have killed an awful lot of people. So it's a very good, it's quite a good point, to be honest. But simply put, if would have been her, she would have had it. She's had 16 years to do it, I suppose. Excuse me. No computers, but lots of drugs. Medea. Context for that, D. Viller, please, if you don't mind. Oh, you're thinking Jessica is a bit like Medea here. Seb says the Baron's attraction to his grandson was such a good way to make him a hateful character to the audience. Yeah. We've had a good chat about that. I suppose that the whole nature of the Baron's sexuality is a big thing in the book, and it's a problematic thing with a lot of people, and it's been whitewashed from the film anyway. The way a woman would kill her child. Thank you. Yeah, I just was. Sometimes I've gone on a wee bit ahead, D, so I'm backtracking to see what people are saying, and I'm not too sure. Yes, absolutely. We talk about Greek mythology and the relationship with Dune a fair bit. So for anybody who doesn't know, that's in relation to, can a woman kill her own children? Absolutely. And Medea, I suppose you're absolutely correct, is the poster woman for that kind of thing, isn't it? So for anybody who doesn't know Medea, plenty of plays about her, etc. Is it Euripides Medea? I believe Medea is the wife of Jason, as in Jason and the Argonauts. And we'll just cut a long story short. Essentially, she aids Jason on his quest for the Golden Fleece, marries him, and has a couple of kids by him. But whenever he returns home, his people berate him for not marrying a local girl. So he basically casts her aside and remarries. And unfortunately for Jason, Medea is no ordinary woman, and she is in fact the daughter of Helios, the sun god. She's literally the daughter of the sun, and he's treated her like dirt. And for those who kind of want to know how the whole sort of Argonautica, or those who don't want to know how the Argonautica story ends, hit mute now for about 20 seconds, or look away now, or whatever it is you do. But essentially what she does is she slits the throats of her two children, and leaves them for Jason, and the utter horror of it, and ascends to heaven, if you like, in her father's sun chariot. She literally, the sun sends a chariot for her, and she takes off into Olympus, where I believe she's married to Achilles, I think, because of this affront. Something like that. I have to look into that. It's been a while since I've looked at Medea. And then, of course, Jason comes out. I suppose the end of Jason is one of the most hilarious and ignoble things, tragic and comic at the same time. But he basically leans against the ship, the hull of the ship of the Argo, the ship. And I kind of nobody kind of understands me but you moment. The ship falls on his head, and the keel crushes him and kills him, and that's how Jason died. So that's Medea. And you're absolutely right, D. Viller. Thank you very much. Yeah, very heavy stuff. Very much considered a nightmare character for men in kind of that Greek society, a bit like Medusa, but is a very interesting character, Medea, I have to say. Well worth a look. But yeah, watch out for your Greek tragedies. Never end well. Your heroic sagas never end well either. They they all end badly. But there we go. Now, so yeah, suspicion. We've said out loud. Jessica is probably. This is what they think. They don't really believe it. They've run the problem here. And as Thufir points, Leto said, "Who's got?" She could have done this any time in the last 16 years. The only thing that Thufir points out here, and this is really interesting, is the Harkonnens mean to destroy you, not just to kill you. That's not good enough. They want to destroy you utterly. And he brings this up. There are fine distinctions in Canley, and I think one of the really interesting quotes. I think one of the most interesting quotes in Dune. This could be a work of art among vendettas. This could be a work of art among vendettas. Am I reading that right? That's just from my notes. Let me just see. Yeah. There's a range of fine distinctions in Canley. This could be a work of art amongst vendettas. Now, I think, have we mentioned Canley before? I think we have. Yeah. Formal feud or vendetta under the rules of the Great Convention, carried on according to the strictest limitations. See Judge of Change. Originally, the rules were designed to protect innocent bystanders. So yeah, we have had a wee nosy about it before, and the different aspects of it. But essentially, a form of revenge, a feud, blood feud, if you like, vendetta. Lots of different words for these kind of things. That just and there's some rules to it, really, to prevent I think nuclear fighting and prevent innocents really getting hurt. So you kind of get the sense that it's almost like formal dueling, if you know what I mean. That there would be rules, walk 10 paces, turn, and this kind of thing, if you know what I mean. And that it has emerged into something on a kind of galactic scale and gotten a bit out of hand. But that kind of touche, how dare, slap of the face, flourish, and a bit of drama and ritual to it. And of course, that this has been going on generations, for many generations by the looks of it, which seems to be particularly stupid. So at this point, I think what Thufir says here to Leto, if it could be a work of art, this could be the suggestion is that this could really be a masterpiece of Machiavellian machinations. There you go, for a bit of alliteration. That there's something, there could be this could be a real attempt at the Mona. This could be almost a Mona Lisa of murder, if you see what I mean. The fact that I don't know, Leto keeps putting the Harkonnens down for being kind of provincial and stupid and this kind of thing. I think he's always badly underestimates them. Leto's shoulders slumped. Duke's shoulders slumped. He closed his eyes, looking old and tired. Cannot be, he thought. The woman has opened her heart to me. And that's just him. Oh, come on. They've gone to such lengths. That really, if this is a work of art amongst vendettas, they're going to actually have a go at me through love. That's a bit. Yeah. What are the Harkonnens thinking here? They're looking to compose a set of epic poems following the death of the Atreides. That it's kind of funny in a way. But again, they're getting rid of their own suspicions here. It cannot be. She's opened her heart to me. But what better way to destroy me than to sow suspicion of the woman I love? I don't know. I think there's plenty of better ways to destroy him than doing that. But it's about causing him mental anguish, isn't it, really? In that sense that there's something, I don't know, something quite mad about I don't know, that desire in people to cause that. There's something sadistic. That's the word I was looking for. Something sadistic about the Harkonnens. He opens his eyes and stares at Howard, and again we get some of these thoughts of his. Perhaps. Is that the next time we get this word? Let me see. Oh, yes, I've jumped ahead a wee bit here. Sorry. Oh, looks like I have scribbled the wrong thing down here. Hang on a wee second. I just figure out what I've written. What's the suggestion? 27 for now. 25. That's a big long footnote. Right. It kind of. There we go. The Duke opened his eyes, stared at Howard, thinking, let him be suspicious. Suspicion is his trade, not mine. Perhaps, if I appear to believe this, that will make another man careless. So the idea is, let's pretend that perhaps if I behave like this, like I do believe it, it'll draw out another Harkonnen attacker. And he seems very weary, very tired. And it's almost as if he doesn't have the energy or the imagination for this. What's the suggestion? What are we going to do? And so here's how constant surveillance of Jessica. She's going to be watched at all times, and that'll not make her paranoid in any way. They're going to do it unobtrusively. For some reason, Duncan Idaho is the ideal person for this. We're going to see how that plays out later on. And the suggestion is that we bring Duncan Idaho back within the next week or so, and use one of his. They're training someone to be a replacement for him, to swap him as in his role with the Fremen. They want to put in a replacement for Idaho to the Fremen, which might not go the way probably wouldn't go the way they thought, I suppose. And Leto again notes here, don't jeopardize our foothold with the Fremen. Don't let that be a problem. So of course not, sir. And of course we get, what about Paul? And here we go again. Perhaps we could alert Dr. Yui. And I've just written, Dr. Yui, nobody's looking at Yui talking about, I leave it in your hands. Use your full discretion. And Leto sort of says, at least I can count on that. And we get, as Leto, we talked about just briefly here, it's going to be a sort of little shift over here in the chapter. But we did talk about when people communicate in the last few chapters, and when certain people go to walk away, and that they're called back by people. And it was in particular about Paul and Jessica not calling people back, but Leto, and Thufir here calling people back, if you see what I mean. And it's something to do with being business-like, being efficient, going about your business, getting exactly what you need done. Leto should know everything before he even turns, if you see what I mean. So he kind of has to come back. And I just thought it's an interesting little thing that we're seeing how a few different characters. It's also done with Leto and Stilgar. Do you want to hang around and let us honor you? No, got stuff to do, got to go. Honor requires that. So it's another one of those wee things. Just noticing the wee sort of motifs and patterns that Frank uses within his writing. Before you go, I've got a film book you should read, The First Approximation Analysis on the Fremen Religion. You recall, you asked me to report on it. And again, the Duke paused, spoke without, not wait. And again, this tiredness, he's really not got his head on right here, has he? And this is all to do with, we're going to get a shift here about these terms that we've heard a little bit about in the epigraph. Of course, my lord, you asked me that what they were shouting, that thought it was Maddie. They directed the term at the young master and he goes at Paul. He goes, yes, my lord. And it's almost as if he possibly thought they might have been saying that to him. We're told it's a family trip in the epigraph, so we're assuming that it's him, Jessica, and Paul. Now, the word Maddie, again, as I said, we had a wee run over that at the start of the chapter. One of the terms and one of the many appellations of Paul Atreides. And it's as it's a term directed at Paul, Leto's surprised. So in this sense, the Mahdi, a legend, a prophecy, a leader will come to them, will be a child of a Bene Gesserit, lead them to true freedom. I think true freedom is death, isn't it? And they will follow. And rather interestingly, let's just see 31. How it put it? It follows the familiar Messiah pattern. And I put familiar Messiah pattern. And what does that mean? Because we've had a wee chat about, of course, there's the Missionaria Protectiva and the Panoplia Propheticus, and it's particularly that collection of myths, etc., that the Bene Gesserit weave and use as part of their kind of raison d'etre. Here we have a character who's outside of the Bene Gesserit, and he may be aware of some of that stuff, but it's quite possible he's not. Otherwise, it wouldn't really work well for the Bene Gesserit, would it? I suppose if that's a Bene Gesserit myth. What do you mean? Oh, that story there, it's a bit like getting a 10% discount for a free stay at Airbnb or something for a Bene Gesserit. Tell a story, fit the role, this kind of thing. So it's something that not everybody's familiar or should be familiar with. It should be that that these myths apply a certain way in certain places, but that they're not known to be Bene Gesserit seeds, if you like. So he calls it a familiar Messiah pattern. Simply, we probably assume that that's based with that Messiahs fall into a particular pattern. And Frank Herbert, one of his big themes in Dune, is pointing this out to us, I suppose. Or sorry, is not pointing it out, but one of the big themes is how do we put it? The messianic impulse that periodically overcomes mankind. So the Messiah pattern is quite an important thing here. The main one that Frank is concerned, the main one that Frank likes to talk about a lot is what he calls the Camelot Pattern, which is really it's to do with Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, and George Patton. But he certainly brings in plenty of other people. But that idea of Camelot that I suppose America was having with Kennedy's, and its association with this golden age in Arthurian myth, this this kind of thing. Let me just backtrack a wee bit. I'll catch up with your comments, folks. There's thought for Jessica plus witchcraft. Yeah, there's often a lot of his thoughts in terms of towards Jessica, witchcraft, witches, this kind of thing. We got the sense that Thufir was quite biased against the Bene Gesserit. That's why I was wondering there. Whenever Leto says you investigated the school, the woman, and we were talking previously in previous chapters about how Leto has purchased Jessica and how his staff had checked her out and so on, and the fact that he didn't, I think, was the point that we were talking about his qualities as a I suppose not a husband, but in this sense, but a partner and as a father, Let me see. Oh, catch up. My mouse is doing my head in as usual. Whenever I scroll down about 5 lines, then it jumps back up a couple for some reason. Let's see. Where do we get to? Sorry. Cynthia saying, I wonder if the Bene Gesserit thought that sending Jessica, a Harkonnen, to be the wife of Leto was a work of art as well. Not just for the breeding program, but for the irony of it all. I think it would be if they knew, wouldn't it? But that, you could actually rewrite this in some interesting ways. We could make an alternative version of Dune. But it is almost as if it is a piece of art, isn't it? And it is so, so meticulously planned, and the plans within plans within plans. There's geometry at the very least. You could put it that way. At the very least, there's geometry to the Harkonnen's plans. Peter saying, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. No one talks about Joseph. Poor Joseph. As I often point out to people, that what happens, the whole virgin birth kind of this thing in the Christian narrative. Christianity, certainly where I come from, likes to portray the idea that that's the only virgin birth ever. And if you're if you get reading around in the ancient world, the amount of virgin births that are about is just obscene. It's just you know, and there's reasons for it. To be honest with you, it's a common story to protect an unborn child, not an unborn child, to protect a child that's born to another parent. Essentially, is that you say that God did it, Zeus did it, Jupiter did it, and Zeus is the greatest serial rapist possibly known to man. And always we go, don't touch the baby. It's Zeus's father, and that will seriously mean, I won't. But we get many of these Greek heroes, if you like. It's I suppose the really the wicked stepfather, if you like, that tries to kill the baby, knowing full well that the actual father is Zeus. So it's not a rare thing at all. Virgin births are 10 a penny in the ancient world. Everyone's doing it. I think it's bizarre. But if you look into it, it's almost every hero you've ever heard of is in some kind of way a virgin birth of a god, or some kind of parthenogenesis or something like that. I'll tell you what, Peter, the book to read if you really want for a really interesting look at the Christ, Jesus Christ, and I suppose the Christ myth, and what would I put it? Time travel. Read "Behold the Man" by Michael Moorcock. Check that out. That's an absolutely brilliant book, and it kind of looks into the reality of Jesus in a very Michael Moorcock type way. Of that, but yeah, it's a really interesting one. So this is pulling Idaho back so soon after letting him go with Stilgar sounds like a really bad idea. How can this possibly be discreet or unquestioned by the Fremen, who clearly have reps at the Atreides? Says, yeah, it is. It's a stupid idea at this point. We don't really know that yet, I suppose, but Halleck won't know. But everything he knows about the Fremen, based on the previous chapter, where he keeps giving reports. He keeps giving reports based on what Idaho knows. So in terms of what their sense of honor, certainly they don't know enough about them at this point, I think. But I don't think they would allow Idaho to. It would be seen as a breach of faith, a breach of trust, wouldn't it? Something like that. Cynthia, when Jessica becomes a Reverend Mother, why does she remember Mohiam's memories in breeding with the Baron? Oh, guess other memory doesn't work the way all the time. We've talked a wee bit about how other memory doesn't really work properly once you start running with it. And it is problematic, and Herbert creates all sorts of problems for us with it. And the biggest problem, I suppose, is Alia. Whenever we get to her, as we go through the Children of Dune, how other memory works with her is quite tricky, and it just doesn't make. It's something that we've discussed on the station here quite a bit, because there are options that are quite amusing to think about. There's logical ways of working the problem, if you like, and it's one of those things that Herbert, as I said, he doesn't like to answer all our questions for us. He likes to give us some mysteries, and not everything he gets, by the way, is correct, but it's still, we have a level of suspension of disbelief, don't we? And which makes it all the more fun, I think. It's one of those reasons why we can keep coming back to Dune. I think there's enough what ifs and maybes and mysteries in it. There's always a curiosity to it, I think. Guess it doesn't work that way. Yeah, I mean, it is really problematic. D. Viller says, regarding the Messiah pattern, I thought the Orange Catholic Bible was a way for the government to combine religions, so there seems to be an awareness and an effort to control in the Imperium with religion. And Doc, what's the significance of orange in the OC Bible? Okay, the OC Bible is a convention, I suppose. The idea is to get, I suppose it's about getting rid of how is it put? The one weapon that all disputant religions have. In other words, the religions that fight each other and cause bother with, what's the problem? And they all claim to be the one true word, I think. And so they work, I think the Commission of Ecumenical Translators is an attempt to work that problem to find out what's the commonality in all religions, and they come up with the answer that thou shalt not disfigure the soul. So then the OC Bible is a hybrid of lots of different religions, quite a whole bunch of them, to be honest with you. We're going to look at it in detail whenever we get to one of the appendix. There's an appendix on religion. Excuse me. But there's a bunch of religions that don't fall under its tenets, if you like, that won't accept it. And it's possibly, and I get the sense that as we go through the books, people were talking about there's no Jewish representation in the early books. I disagree. I think there's plenty of quotations from, the Old Testament books, if you like, also the Torah, this kind of thing. But whenever we do get to the character of Rebecca and the wild Jews, I think the Jews in that sense in the Dune series, and who's the other group I'm thinking on? Hang on, let me see. Oh God, so the Fremen. Duh, sorry. So are the two groups that the Fremen go on, and they start on planetary migrations for pretty much on the go from this point. And we're told it's because there's a schism, but we're told it's because they're denied the Hajj. Excuse me. So whatever the tenets of the OC Bible and the CET, this universal religion, doesn't allow the Hajj, and that's why the Fremen take off. It's the reason why they're the people of Mizir and why they're the Zen Sunni wanderers. And I think it's the same for the Jews in that sense. And it's a bit like, I'd imagine it's a bit like, I don't know if you know much about the early Christian church and how they were treated by the Romans, for example. Simply put, there's an awful lot of persecutions against the early Christians, and the main reason is that they will not bow to the emperor. They won't acknowledge the emperor as a deity, because the emperor is a living god, sort of, or else is deified upon his death. So it's that kind of thing about refusing to, bow to another god. This kind of thing that results in those persecutions, which go on for quite a while. So the OC Bible, yeah, and also it's also linked into the Butlerian Jihad in whatever relation that whatever kind of revolt happens there. It's fundamentally about men with machines enslaving other men, and not building machines in the likeness of humans. So there's a fair bit to this. And as I suppose we're getting the last couple of chapters there, we've been getting quite a few quotes from Gurney Halleck, which initially we think, is this the Torah, is this the Old Testament? And then we're informed that all of these are from the Orange Catholic Bible. So at the very least, it's a combination of the, I'd say the Quran, the Torah, the Christian, but all the Abrahamic ones, and a bit of this and a bit of that. But it's very much a hybrid. And we'll have a wee look into it in detail, as I said, whenever we get to the appendix. Doc, what's the significance of Orange? The House of Orange is fundamentally associated with Protestantism. It's a Dutch royal family. The current family, Peter, is the House of Royal House of Amsterdam now. Sorry, Holland, Netherlands. Apologies to anybody from. Sorry, get my terminology right. I think is the House of Orange Nassau, which is a distaff branch, I believe. The House of Orange is extinct, and has been since the death of William III of Orange. And for anybody, so the orange represents Protestantism, I suppose, and the Orange Catholic. So it's meant to be a hybrid of the two major Christian faiths, if you like, Orange Protestantism and Catholicism. And if the big problem in where I'm at, Northern Ireland, Orangemen, all of that's all to do with that. So orange is a color fundamentally associated with the Protestant faith. And that's what that refers to. So it's kind of almost an oxymoron in a sense, because of course, people, the Protestant faith is protesting against Catholicism. Peter saying, Leto has almost no religious significance to the Fremen like Paul and Jessica do. Jesus and Mary are both divine. Joseph and Leto are not. I suppose how you look at it, it's a bit like also then you get those pairings, Peter, with for example, who am I thinking on? The quads from the Trojan War myth. So sorry, the Clytemnestra and Helen and Castor and Pollux. So they're, let me see, two sets of twins, if you like. The Dioscuri is the two males, and that's Castor and Pollux, as the constellation Gemini, and then the two sisters are, of course, Helen of Troy, as she's eventually known. She's Helen of Sparta, and her sister is Clytemnestra of Sparta. Yeah, in each case, one of those is divine and one is mortal. Isn't that right? It's just like you're saying there. There we go. Well, do Doc, says Peter. Cynthia, Peter, good question. How much of the Bene Gesserit really remember during the ritual becoming a Reverend Mother? Jessica seems to have been a really critical in her Jessica seems to have really critical. Not sure what that word is there. In her observational abilities too. Isn't orange the North Irish color? It's Peter. Orange is it's associated with the Orange Men, which are Protestant loyalists. It's a cult in Northern Ireland, and they're all to do with William of Orange III, and they're loyal to him. And they march every year on the 12th of March. If you've ever been to Netherlands, I go over to Amsterdam quite a lot, and they have there's an Orange Day there, and it has none of those connotations over there, and it's really nice. And the whole country, everybody's wearing orange, and I've actually spent not too sure what they call it. Maybe is it Holland or Netherlands Day or something like their national day in the Netherlands, and everybody there dresses in orange, and it's their national color. So no, it's not the national that causes bother over here, Peter. But Northern Irish colours are considered to be the sort of red, white, and blue if you're a Protestant, and if you're not, they're considered the Irish colours, I suppose. But it's the Irish flag is actually green, white, and orange. A lot of people will mistakenly tell you that it's green, white, and gold, and it's not. So the green and the orange are meant to represent the two sides of the Christian faith in Ireland, if you like. Elrond and Elros. Yeah, there's lots of pairings like that, I suppose. Even Romulus and Remus, if you want to go things like that. Yeah. As I said, that we have a fair amount of inversions and pairings with characters like this, and I suppose very much in this sense, I think Leto here is as much an old man as Thufir is in this chapter. To be honest with you, tired, weary, not really with it. So yeah, just thought that familiar Messiah pattern. They only, and we're told, by the way, that they think he's the Maddie? No, they only hope, my lord. Here's a film book, and again he chucks it in his pocket. I'll look at it later. Right now I need time to think, and we get Leto leaving. And the rest of this chapter is a bit of an oddity. I thought it's not a particularly long chapter, but in terms of what happens here, I suppose really Frank paints a bit of a scene for us. I suppose it's like somebody walking the battlefield the night before the battle, or walking the parapets of a castle, that kind of thing. But just sort of taking in the place before who knows what. It's an uneasy kind of dander, if you like. And he basically, throughout this, I mean, I made a few notes on it, but not really much happens here. He decides he'll have a wander around. He's not really paying attention to where he's at or who's about. And he checks in on Paul, who's now sleeping in the conference room that we were at previously. And I've put down as the pre-dawn hush, if you like. Where are we? Number 35. Pre-dawn hush had come over the desert basin, and he looked up. Straight overhead, the stars were a sequin shawl flung over blue-black. So a blue-black, think about that, a shawl for a minute, as Low on the southern horizon, the night's second moon peered through, a thin dust haze, an unbelieving moon that looked at him with cynical light. Hmm. As the Duke watched, the moon dip beneath the shield wall cliffs, frosting them, and in the sudden intensity of darkness, he experienced a chill. He shivered. So we're getting a chunk of imagery here, and it's all that we're going to get some kind of funerary images here, funeral images. We've got the shawl here first of all, blue black. We're going to get a bell, for whom the bell tolls type of image, and of course we're going to have a kind of Grim Reaper scythes, as well as we've got a chill and he's shivering in the darkness. He's not painting a particularly nice picture for us here, and again, I still think the frosting on the cliffs is kind of funny. I know he's trying to show a bit of frost on them, but it doesn't make sense. I still think it's kind of like a cake-like description. And anger shot through him, almost like a being hit by a weapon, isn't it? And previously he was consumed by it. We can't get away from anger with Leto. It seems to be ever present with him. And we get a little bit of his thoughts here. The Harkonnen, love the alliteration and the assonance here. It's not assonance, sorry, alliteration and consonants here. Harkonnens have hindered and hounded and hunted me for the last time. That's great, isn't it? You've got all that alliteration with all those H's, and then within all of those words, you've got those N sounds. The Harkonnens have hindered and hounded and hunted me for the last time. It's very poetic, isn't it? And here's his thoughts on and it's a bit prophetic, by the way, isn't it? For the last time, for the father nothing. We all know this, don't we? And it's going to be kind of true. We keep getting these little things that are said, that they're running through. They actually are true. Some of them that Thufir and Leto come up with. Tell me what you think about this, folks. This is Leto's attitude to the Harkonnen again. They've hindered and hounded and hunted me for the last time. They are dung heaps with village provost minds. Here I make my stand. What a very poor insult. It's not even, they suck the fetid milk from the devil's hairy flute or something like that. It's just, they're dung heaps. They're just piles of shit with village provost minds. And I just thought, I don't know what you think of Leto, but he consistently underestimates the Harkonnen, consistently puts them down as being stupid. And I've just written down here, he's snobbish. He looks down on them because he thinks he's better than them. And I think that's his big problem, isn't it? He has there's a certain air of superiority, a superiority complex maybe with Leto, and we kind of got it whenever we're told about how Jessica looks at him previously whenever he deals with the servants when he's not in a particularly good mood or in a hurry, and particularly how he treated Mapes earlier. He was a bit shitty to Mapes. So I've just thought, here I make my stand, digging in, not going anywhere. And we were talking about the key to warfare being mobility or deception. Well, all these wonderful quotes about warfare that just tend to be a bit literary, don't they? And you wonder how well they go down in practice. Deception is the key to all warfare. Warfare, what we were told previously, is a calculated risk, War's not a good thing. And I must make my stand, and a touch of sadness. Oh, like again, I don't know how Frank. I don't know what Frank's thinking here. I don't know what you guys think about this, but in terms of how he builds sympathy for other characters, he kind of lets us see them at a certain angle, and then really does let them see that they're quite human, and builds, particularly for Jessica, who comes across really, whoa, what kind of mother is this at the very start of the book? And really, he does work very hard to build up these sympathies for Jessica, and even we're seeing plots against her here. It doesn't quite work the same with Leto. And I find it hard to be sympathetic for him. even though he's doomed. And it's just this kind of thinking, if you see what I mean. Dung heaps, village provost mines. He keeps making negative statements about their intellect. Basically, that's the way he looks at the Harkonnens. That just is always putting down their intellect. And as I said, I wonder why, because the Harkonnens come across really as quite Machiavellian, quite devious, quite, and there's intelligence and cunning behind their plans, And here I make my stand, and he thought with a touch of sadness, I must rule with iron claw, as the hawk among lesser birds. Unconsciously, his hand brushed the hawk emblem of his tunic, and he thought with a touch of sadness, I must rule with iron claw, as the hawk among lesser birds. And again, I just think it's a bit of a superiority complex, There we go. I'm going to get a sip of fluids here, and I'll have a look at your comments, folks. By lacuna, I just meant that there are things missing in what Jessica sees or trained to see, even as there may be memories missing in the ritual of becoming a Reverend Mother. Thank you, Cynthia. Peter says, this makes sense since Jessica had to become a Reverend Mother on the fly in non-Bene Gesserit settings without other Bene Gesserit present. Yeah. Peter says, the two moon, yet another Gemini, like Trasimene. Oh, Lake Trasimene. No, I'll have to look that up. Lake Trasimene. Let me know, isn't it? The Battle of Lake Trasimene. Yeah. Punic Wars, yes. I'd have to look into the details of that battle. Punic Wars are pretty interesting, I have to say. The Battle of Lake Trasimene, folks, just off Wikipedia here, quickly, it was fought when a Carthaginian force under Hannibal ambushed a Roman army commanded by Gaius Flaminius on 21st of June 217 BC during the Second Punic War. That took place on the north shore of Lake Trasimene to the east of Cortona and resulted in heavy defeat for the Romans. Punic Wars. Aye. I'll tell you a really interesting one, if you're into that kind of thing, is Hannibal, yes. Have a look at what's a great one. The Battle of Eurymedon. That's, if you want to know, people argue what's the most important battle in history, or what's the one that changes human society, human civilization. And a lot of people would took place at dawn. A lot of people would argue, go with the Battle of Thermopylae, but I'd say there's a much more important battle of Eurymedon, and it's an Athenian admiral, general, I suppose, strategoi you would call him, Kimon of Athens, and he basically manages to, in engaging the Persian fleet, manages to catch them in harbour, and takes pretty much the Persian army and a lot of their fleet intact. Pretty much, I think, triples the size of his own fleet. It's an interesting engagement, The Baron is like a Hannibal. I don't know. I think Hannibal's a bit overrated, personally. I don't know an awful lot about that period of Roman history. My stuff's mostly Greek, and I suppose from my point of view, I would look, I suppose, from the Gracchi onwards, and then my big area of knowledge within the Roman stuff, because I minored in it and I took mostly the Greek stuff. Did lots of theatre and things like that, but Roman Britain's particularly interesting. I have a whole bunch of Roman books here. Listen, I must dig out some of this classical stuff for someday actually, and have a wee natter about some of these things. But yeah, for those who don't know, we're talking about the Punic Wars here. There are 3 of them in total. Major set of wars fought between the Romans and the Carthaginians. And interesting, you can get me links to this. You ever see this one that you get a bit of a Shakespeare thing that you I bite my thumb at you, sir. and that your puny is accompanies this, So is it punis, isn't it? Where we get modern day Tunis. So the idea that something is puny and weak comes from it's a pejorative name for the Carthaginians. Punis, like punis, to be puny. But there you go. But yeah, the Punic Wars are pretty interesting. Scipio Africanus and stuff like that. My knowledge is kind of general. I wouldn't be able to fill in the details. Yeah, no, it's a kind of traditional kind of thing, I suppose. The commander pacing about. I don't know. He's very unsure of himself here. And you think if he was attacked at this point, anybody could take, almost anyone could assassinate him. He's just so lost in his own thoughts, I think. And it's this touch of sadness that he must be the superior bird amongst the lesser birds. It really does tell you a lot about how he looks at maybe not just maybe the Harkonnens, but the lesser houses of the Landsrat, etc., the other houses of the Landsrat. And again, if you remember what Herbert talks about the military, that we as much as this some people have described Dune as an example of a psychotic family novel. And in that case, we've got a psychotic family that has an army and atomic weapons. If you see what I mean. And what sort of people end up like that? I don't know. There's a lot to think about the Atreides. And as much as we know this is a feudal society, his kind of goal is to be democratic, but he has to accept that he'll be the one to lead. I must rule with iron claw. I must see, and cause damage. And he is a bit of a vandal, I think. He's a bit of a, let's commit a crime and we'll say this happened. Let's commit a crime and we'll say that happened. He's quite criminal in his thoughts, and especially because as much as we say that this universe exists in a certain way, he's operating within that universe and he's using the legal systems within it to commit crimes. So the Atreides are very much like a kind of mafia family on a massive, massive scale, I think, in many, many ways. Or again, there's this, I suppose, allusions to dynasties and stuff like this and royalty, this kind of thing. Let's stump that out. But yet there is something snobbish about him. And again, we get a little bit of imagery here. Let's see. I need some juice. And he walks softly down the length of the room onto the balcony overlooking the landing field. A guard at the corner of the balcony, recognizing the Duke by the dim reflection of lights from the field, snapped to attention. At ease, he murmured. He leaned against, and we have this cold metal thing. And something, the sense of not right within all of the chapters that we've come to Arrakis. The cold, we had the rail of the staircase going up to the door. And here we go. I think this is kind of interesting. Oh, we've jumped ahead. Hang on. Or have I jumped back? Oh, yeah. Here we are. 34. Sorry. Maybe I have jumped ahead. Here, let's see. Yeah, it's one of those ones where I've written the wrong number now. 34. My 4s look like my 9s. That's my problem. Sorry. Where are we? Sorry, I'm just going to jump back a wee bit. I was reading the wrong bit there. He arrives at the balcony overlooking the airfield. Sorry about that, folks. I've just jumped ahead about just a couple of paragraphs. The cold metal of the balcony. That's where we were at. And we had talked about the sequin shawl flung over the blue-black. And the second moon peered through a dust haze. And sorry, I have gone over this before. We have moved through it. But I just thought the unbelieving moon. And it looked at him with a cynical light. A very interesting little phrase. And we did go through that wee bit of snobbery. Sorry, that was my 9s look like a 4. So I jumped back and forward and we had read over that wee bit because we talked about the Harkonnens hindered, hounded, hunted, etc. Apologies, I do get lost now and then. Here we are. So I'll just read this wee bit. To the east, the night grew a faggot of luminous grey, then the seashell opalescence that dimmed the stars. There came the long bell-tolling movement of dawn striking across a broken horizon. It was a scene of such beauty, it caught all his attention. So he finally gets rid of his anger for a second. Some things beggar likeness, he thought. And he had never imagined anything here could be as beautiful as that shattered red horizon and the purple and ochre cliffs beyond the landing field where the night's faint dew had touched life into the hurried seeds of Arrakis. He saw great puddles of red blooms, and running through them an articulate tread of violet like giant footsteps. "It is a beautiful morning, sire," the guard said. "Yes, it is." Now, just before we go any further, as we're finishing up, we've got this wee imagery. We have that. We had what do we say? We had the shawl previously, and we've now we've just had. Where did we get it? Sorry. Yes, there came the long bell-tolling movement. And in a wee second here, I'll just read on actually till we get to it. Yes, it is. The Duke nodded, thinking, perhaps this planet could grow on one. Perhaps it could become a good home for my son. And then he saw the human figures moving into the flower fields, sweeping them with strange scythe-like devices. Dew gatherers, water so precious here that even the dew must be collected. And it could be a hideous place, the Duke thought. Sorry, just wanted to read on there till we got that last little imagery there. So we've had the shawl. We've had the bell tolling. And then, of course, strange scythe-like devices. Pardon me, all imagery around death. And I just want to run through that. If we step back a wee moment, he says some things beggar likeness. So we have this shattered red horizon, purple and ochre cliffs, great puddles of red blooms, an articulate tread of violet, and we have this phrase about giant footsteps. Like giant footsteps. And I really wanted it to draw attention that there's almost this sense of it being a red carpet, if you know what I mean. And in particular, when we come to the House of Atreides, and we come in particular to Agamemnon and his death and his doom, and it's this sense of working, depending on how you look at it, the red or the purple carpet, and these two colors here, and the fact that they're like giant footsteps. It's the point of hubris within the Oresteia. Agamemnon's wife sort of forces the hubris, it goads him, tricks him into it, if you like. It's the carpet, and he walks barefoot upon it. We have those like giant footsteps there. That's him doomed at that point. Basically, Agamemnon is doomed because the gods will just hammer him into the ground because he walks barefoot on that carpet. This red carpet is reserved only for the gods themselves. So when Agamemnon does that, his hubris, his pride, if you like, and saying that I am like a god. Yes, I will. Thank you, wife. I will walk on this carpet as a god. That's when the gods will absolutely slam him. And that's pretty much what hubris equates to. Mostly in Greek mythologies, you've crossed the line, but pretty much you're acting as if you were a god, and they will slam you hard and lethally for it. So that imagery, in particular, we have a lot of imagery about death. And even, the red blooms would be suggestive, things like poppy fields, World War I, this kind of thing. Particularly these purple, violet, red colors, blood, death, doom, destruction, but especially that association with Agamemnon, I think is just worth pointing out here. I'll catch up with your comments here, folks. Peter was talking about Luke Trasimene, Hannibal took place at dawn. The Baron is like Hannibal. Peter's saying, Peter, my money on the Baron is Laius. If you want an analog from Greek mythology, the Baron is Laius, the father of Oedipus. And if we know that Paul has a lot of the attributes of Oedipus. And in particular, we had if you looked at the Peloponnese videos, we talked a wee bit about Chrysippus and how Laius kidnapped the boy Chrysippus and took him to Thebes, and how this got Pelops and all his men to take after him, and how Atreus and his brother Thyestes had arrested Laius, etc., at Thebes for stealing the boy. The whole thing to do with the boy, that Pelops doesn't take action against Laius because it's considered that Laius only has the boy's good interests at heart. And I believe Pelops is ultimately later punished for that. Laius is associated with a cult. It's a catamite cult. The process of catamite, keeping young boys for sexual slavery. And it's a military cult in Thebes. And it's associated with, and if you start putting little things that you know about the Baron together, and what we know about Paul and the Atreides, etc., my viewpoint is that Laius is the closest analog to the Baron Harkonnen in Greek mythology, shares his tastes and his evil. And again, if we understand that Lord Raglan's ritual steps, it's also, whenever we do look at Dune, one of the things I like to point out is that it's the mythology and mythography that Frank Herbert uses. There's plenty of it, but he particularly goes with 3 or 4 writers who are very heavily influenced by sort of Lord Raglan's ideas initially, and then very much the Jungian kind of thing. Interestingly enough, when we go have a look at, if we talk about The Stars My Destination being a big influence on Dune, and many, many other science fiction books, and the other book, The Demolished Man by Alfred Bester, which are voted pretty much in the top 10 of a lot of considered people's science fiction favorites, if you like. There's a lot of similarities I'm starting to see between The Stars My Destination, as it's also known, Tiger, and Dune. But the idea of Agam Jabbar is there. He actually goes to Arrakis, talks about the desert planet and the creatures there. This is long before Dune, and it's the difference, I suppose, is it's Freudian, whereas Dune's very Jungian. So there you go. But if you check out Laius, the father of Oedipus, I think he's heavily if we had to pick one character to be the Baron, I would go with him. He has too many similar attributes. Deviler says noble families are mafias when you get down to it. For example, Alexander, Caesar, oh yeah, absolutely. We had a wee chat about this, Deviler, that all, yeah, pretty much your kings and queens are people who just made stuff up. Or in Ireland, for example, a long time ago, rye is the Irish word for king. Chap who had the most cows in the area. A lot of kings in Ireland, you know. But yeah, Peter Zenek, doesn't he see that again just before his death? Well, I'm not too sure what you meant there, Peter. Is it just all the colors and stuff? Leto sees the beautiful colors, but interprets it as a battlefield with red puddles and the articulate tread of violet flowers like footsteps. Sing Muse, the rage of Leto. Absolutely, Cynthia. Puddle, yeah, it really does kind of evoke a kind of almost a World War One trench warfare. You know, that the poppies, the articulate tread, tank tracks, this kind of thing. Violet flowers, almost violent. You're right. It's a very good analogy. It's almost as if he is interpreting this, and he sees it as beautiful, doesn't he? Interesting. Some things beggar likeness, he thought, and I think that's a very interesting way of looking at it. Catamites again, says colleges and cannibals, always with the catamites. Well, it's pretty much the only kind of I only sort of know kind of two topics of conversation that we can chat about catamites colleges, and that happens to be around the Dune and Greek mythology. Well, particularly with Laius, anyway. It's if anybody's the person to have a wee look at is if you look at the Greek myths by Robert Graves. He's got some very interesting comments on his notes in relation to the Peloponnese myths, but particularly to whenever we get to Laius there. And that word catamite, yeah, I think the last time we talked about it, I was actually quoting him, wasn't I, colleges? D. Miller says, thanks all and have a good evening. Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us, and thanks for your contribution. You know, And goodness, that's been one of the quickest ones, hasn't it? It's been a nice wee short chapter, and I think we have another nice little short chapter coming up before I'm going to be absolutely hammered with an enormous one. I think the one after that's pretty big. But there we go. Yeah, it's an interesting. Not a lot happens here, but we do get a good insight into these two men, and it's a bit of a like for we get to compare and contrast Paul. Sorry, not Paul. Leto and Thufir, and they're alike in some ways, and I think their failings are similar as well. All the colors in the sunrise, he sees them again. One or two visions after the tooth. The other vision is Paul in a dirigible. Oh dear. Really? I must have a look at that. That would be interesting. Yeah, and again, we can sort of see that. I just kind of got it as a bit like I was seeing the poppies in my own head, imagining it as we read that description. He never imagined anything here. By the way, it's not he never imagined anything could be so beautiful. Just he never imagined anything here could be as beautiful as that shattered red horizon and the purple and ochre cliffs. Beyond the landing field where the night's faint dew had touched life into the hurried seeds of Arrakis, he saw great puddles of red blooms, and running through them. To run through someone is to stab them, isn't it? An articulate tread of violet, like giant footsteps. And just punctuated with beautiful morning, sire. Yes, it is. Perhaps, and we talked about, by the way, that I would point out those last couple of perhapses there. I ran on a little bit there just to get that we have the bell tolling, the scythe like devices, and of course the shawl. Three things associated with death and funerals. Human figures moving into the flower fields, sweeping them with strange scythe-like devices, dew gatherers. Water so precious here, even that even the dew must be collected. And it could be a hideous place, the Duke thought. Yeah, and I don't know, it really does that kind of have those evocations of, things like the Battle of the Somme, this kind of thing. If you've seen that kind of artwork, the recent anniversaries, I suppose, over in Britain, they did a big poppy display. Then I think they surrounded one of the Queen's properties in the Tower of London or something, just thousands and thousands of red poppies. I think the poppies come up in more because of shelling, isn't it? That the seeds are, I think the seeds are kind of hydrostatic and they remain deep underground, and it was all the shelling that brought them up, and that's why you would have all these fields of red poppies, if you see what I mean. For whom the bell tolls, yes, indeed. All the colours he sees in one or two visions afterwards. And yeah, and as I said, with Atreides, with that family, the hubris, red and purple, depending on which version you're, purple's often a colour associated with royalty. And just depending on which version, it's either a red carpet or a purple carpet. The giant footsteps is also kind of reminded, to walk on that as if you're a god, is in that sense in the original play, if you like, in the myths around him, is to walk like Zeus. The giant footsteps, I thought, were very suggestive of, Zeus himself, if you see what I mean, the footsteps of the gods. And that so what is, if we broke it down to that, and I've just ended with Grim Reaper, death, water. Far too many perhapses, far too many maybes. This kind of thing, but it's a fun chapter. But again, it's one that I think sets up a lot of imagery, and the back and forth I think reaffirms it. It's good to see a bit of I suppose it reaffirms the trust between Leto and Thufir at the same time, while creating suspicion upon Jessica, even though they know it's not real. And how it's going to make Jessica suspicious, isn't it? And paranoid. Well, I don't know, paranoid, but certainly aware. And of course, we're going to have a few other consequences of some of Thufir's decisions in this chapter, which I think will be interesting. Idaho's the right man for the job to follow Jessica. I think that's a good one. But there we go. And we're at the end of chapter 13, is, I suppose, as well. The 13th chapter, unlucky for some. I don't know. As I said, the one thing I think, and if we think about the next epithet, by the way, just not that we'll carry on tonight, we'll go with this next time. We've been talked about all the mistakes that Leto makes, as you know, how he's presented in the epigraphs, propaganda about the man, all of these things, and there's vagaries about him. Really, when we're told about the qualities of him being a father, they're not saying they're good or bad. We're not, there's sometimes we're making assumptions, I think. But the next ones that starts the next chapter is very telling. There is probably no more terrible instant of enlightenment than the one in which you discover your father is a man with human flesh. And that's exactly what Leto is. Just a man. In the same way, every single person, all the people that we elect to run our countries, all of this stuff, world leaders, religious leaders, no matter how they pretend to be, whatever face they put on, whatever mask they wear, they're just people with all of their attributes and feelings, But there we go. But listen, folks, that's been great fun tonight, and that was quite a snappy little one. And thank you very much for your contributions. As always, there's been lots of wee things there. I must, excuse me, I must have a wee nosy at that battle. Peter, thank you very much for that. The big lake that I find interesting, if anybody's really interested in mythology, the lake to look at in Italy is Lake Nemi. That has a lot of to do with the association of the priesthood at Nemi, which is fascinating. And if you've ever heard of The Golden Bough, a particular book on mythology by Fraser, the opening part of this massive and incredibly influential book on mythology is looking at the priesthood of Nemi, which is actually quite interesting. Basically, if you're a slave in Rome and you wanted to run, the safest place you could run to would be this little shrine at Nemi. And if you could get there, the Romans wouldn't touch you, providing you killed the priest there. Because to become the priest of Nemi, you have to kill the previous priest. And it's a really strange and interesting little place. I hope to go there in reality one day. But yeah, it's in particular tied into a whole series of myths to do with the goddess Diana, etc. Fascinating. And yeah, by the way, Fraser's The Golden Bough, I highly recommend it. If anybody hasn't read it, if you're really into mythology, it's not a book that Frank Herbert used, sadly. Otherwise, we would have talked a fair bit about it more. But listen, thanks, Doug. I'll check out Laius, no problem. Because Laius would be the husband of Jocasta, then, and then there you go, actual father of Oedipus, isn't it? So biological father. But there we go. Greek myths is always Robert Graves for that one, and you'll find plenty about him in Apollodorus's Library of Greek Mythology. But listen, folks, thank you very much as always for joining me. This was a good fun one, and I wasn't too bad on the throat actually as well. So I very much enjoyed it. And as always, I'll let you head on and say good morning, good evening, good night, good afternoon, no matter where you are. And look after yourselves and take care. All the very best. Good night, folks. Bye-bye.